Now, when a nerve impulse is initiated, one of the first events that has to occur is called depolarization. Now, some stimulus is going to depolarize the neuron's membrane. Now, as we're looking at this picture here, we're looking at this from the aspect of this axon here, but this can also occur in the dendrites, cell body, but we're going to show this depolarization from here. And here is that polarized membrane here. You know, when we just simply say there's a lot more sodium on the outside and more potassium on the inside. But as you depolarize it, a depolarized membrane, responding to some stimulus, is going to allow sodium to flow into the membrane. You know, like we're trying to show on the second picture here. Something stimulates this membrane and depolarizes it, so sodium rushes in. Now that stimulus can be a flash of light, a pinprick, anything that this membrane is responsive to, and it's going to cause sodium to flush in. And when sodium flushes in like this, you know, we're going to exchange the charge. You know, as more positive ions rush in, okay, the inside becomes much more positive. And that is what we call the action potential. You know, that's going to be the initiation of it at that point. Now, this slide, we're going to take a look at how the action potential is actually propagated. Now, some impulses or some stimuli may be what we call subthreshold. Subthreshold means that it's not strong enough to generate the action potential, and the results of this depolarization fade out after a very short time. So in essence, you wouldn't detect these stimuli. Okay, but the action potential, once it starts, you know, it's going to spread all across the entire length of the axon. Now again, that may start, remember out here at the dendrites are the receivers. They'll have an action potential generated that will transfer through them, through the cell body, and then through the axon. And if it starts going along this axon, and this trigger zone right here called the axon hillock, you know, if it's strong enough of a signal when it reaches that, it's going to travel all along the entire axon to the next nerve. Now think of this as this is an example we call the all or none law. If the switch is flipped, it's going to go. Just like you can't turn a light switch on halfway and expect half the lights to come on. You know, you flip that light switch, they all come on or they all stay off. And the same is true here. Now, potassium ions, you know, that's the K ones, are going to rush out of the neuron after the sodium ions rush in. So what's happening here, if you look along here, here's our propagating action potential. The sodium ions are rushing in and they are diffusing across. And as they diffuse down this way, they depolarize the next segment, like we're showing right here. And as those ions diffuse further, they depolarize the next segment and the action potential moves along. This is why the action potential goes along at its continued strength. It doesn't lose anything. Okay, now once you have this potential started, you've got to start repolarizing the membrane. Now at this point, back in here, which we call the refractory membrane, this membrane is trying to return to the action potential, you know, return to the resting potential. It's unable to stimulate a response here, so if sodium ions diffuse this way, we're not going to generate an action potential going in this direction. It can only go in the direction that the membrane is in a polarized state. This is refractory, it's returning to polarized. Okay, it can only go to the excited one. Now, the way it returns to this resting potential is through the sodium-potassium pump. The sodium-potassium pump pumps the sodium ions out and potassium ions in and returns the membrane to its polarized state. And remember from our study of membrane transport, this is an active transport mechanism, so ATP is burned in this process.